Long ago, in a wealthy city of narrow streets and echoing bells, there ruled a king whose greatest passion was not justice, nor wisdom, nor the welfare of his people, but clothes. He loved velvet cloaks, jeweled collars, silken gloves, and robes embroidered with gold so much that each hour of the day seemed to require a different costume. While other rulers inspected armies or studied matters of state, this king lingered in dressing rooms lined with mirrors, asking how each sleeve fell, how each hem moved, and how splendid he appeared beneath candlelight. The whole court learned to orbit this strange obsession. Ministers praised fabrics they did not understand. Servants carried garments as if transporting sacred relics. Courtiers bowed not only to the king, but to the shimmer of his sleeves and the cut of his coat. In that palace, appearances became a kind of law. No one wished to seem dull, unfashionable, or out of step with royal taste. And so, little by little, the habit of honesty grew weak, while the habit of flattering whatever stood before them grew strong. One autumn evening, when the wind had begun to turn colder and the sky hung low over the city, two strangers arrived at the gates. They called themselves master weavers. Their words were smooth, their bows graceful, and their eyes always measuring the room before they spoke. They claimed to know a craft unlike any other in the world. They could weave cloth of such extraordinary beauty, they said, that its colors would shimmer like dreamlight. But that was not its most remarkable quality. The cloth, they whispered, would remain invisible to anyone hopelessly stupid or unfit for office. Now this promise enchanted the king more deeply than any jewel ever had. What finer garment could there be than one that not only made him appear magnificent, but also revealed the fools in his kingdom? With such cloth, he thought, he could distinguish the wise from the witless, the capable from the unworthy. Vanity and suspicion joined hands in his mind. At once he ordered the strangers to be given rooms, looms, gold thread, fine silk, and every comfort needed for their work. The weavers bowed low, thanked him humbly, and began their performance. In the workshop prepared for them, the two swindlers set up their looms and sat down with great seriousness. They moved their hands back and forth, lifted nothing, measured nothing, cut nothing, and yet behaved as though they were handling the most delicate fabric ever made. They demanded more silk. They requested more gold thread. Every bundle brought to them disappeared into hidden bags and locked chests, while the looms remained utterly bare. Still the men worked late into the night, speaking in the language of craft and beauty, confident that no one would dare confess what could not be seen. At last, the king grew impatient to know how the marvelous cloth was progressing, yet he hesitated to go himself. Instead, he sent his oldest and most trusted minister, a man long respected for wisdom and caution. The old minister walked to the workshop with slow, careful steps, telling himself there was nothing to fear. Surely he would admire the cloth, report its beauty, and return with dignity intact. But when he entered the room and looked upon the looms, his heart sank. He saw nothing at all. The old minister blinked, stepped closer, and peered again. Still there was nothing, not the faintest thread, not the slightest gleam. A terrible thought crept through him. Was he a fool? Was he unfit for office after all these years? He dared not test the truth aloud. So when the swindlers asked whether he admired the pattern and the colors, he forced a smile onto his pale face. He praised the elegance of what he could not see, memorized details that did not exist, and returned to the palace carrying not cloth, but fear. Before the king, the old minister bowed and described the cloth in elaborate terms. He spoke of subtle colors, graceful patterns, and workmanship too refined for ordinary speech. The king listened with growing delight. If the minister had seen it, then the cloth must be real. Yet beneath that delight lived another thought, cold and quiet. If ever the king himself failed to see it, what would that say about him? Even in triumph, the trap had already begun to close. And still, because no one wished to step outside the lie became stronger. To make certain, the king sent another official, younger and eager to rise. He too entered the workshop with confidence, and he too found only emptiness stretched across the frames of the looms. But ambition can be just as fearful as age. The young official did not dare lose his place by speaking plainly, so he admired what he could not see, nodding eagerly while the swindlers described invented designs. When he returned, his praise was even more extravagant than the minister's. Thus falsehood passed from one frightened heart to another, until it sounded almost like truth. At last the king could wait no longer. Surrounded by chosen courtiers and wrapped in ceremonial dignity, he went himself to see the wonder that was being prepared for him. The swindlers bowed deeply and gestured toward the looms with theatrical pride. The king looked, then looked again. Nothing lay there. The emptiness struck him like a blow. For one trembling instant, all his certainty deserted him. Could it be that he, the king, was unfit to rule? The thought was too shameful to endure. So he smiled, praised the cloth, and told the weavers it was exquisite. Once the king had spoken, the rest followed easily. Every courtier leaned forward to admire the empty air. Each repeated what others had already said, adding more detail, more wonder, more certainty. The room filled with admiration for a garment that did not exist. The swindlers received medals, titles, and richer gifts. The king commanded that the new clothes be finished in time for a great procession through the city. Outside, rumor spread quickly. Soon the whole kingdom had heard of the miraculous fabric that only the wise and worthy could see. On the night before the procession, the swindlers remained awake with candles burning low around them. They snipped the air with great shears. They stitched with needles threaded by nothing at all. They held up invisible sleeves, folded invisible collars, and called for attendants to help them move the delicate fabric. Those who watched saw only gestures and shadow, but no one dared speak the obvious. By now, the deceit no longer belonged to the swindlers alone. It had been adopted, protected, and fed by every fearful person who stood nearby. Morning came, and the king entered the dressing chamber to be clothed in his new magnificence. The swindlers lifted their empty arms and said they were presenting the trousers, the coat, the mantle. They fastened nothing around him, arranged nothing upon him, yet stepped back with solemn satisfaction. The king turned before the mirror and saw only his own exposed body adorned by pride and terror. Still he nodded. Still he asked whether the clothes sat well. And all around him the courtiers whispered that the fit was perfect, the cut masterful, the elegance beyond compare. Then the doors of the palace were opened, and the king stepped out into the public street, beneath banners, bells, and a dim morning sky. Behind him walked attendants, bending low, as if lifting a long train that was not there. The crowd had gathered in dense silence. Men and women craned their necks. Parents raised children to see. Yet they all knew the story of the cloth, and each person feared the judgment hidden within it. So one voice praised the sleeves, another admired the colors, and soon the entire street echoed with borrowed wonder. But admiration born of fear has a strange, brittle sound. Smiles looked strained. Applause rose too quickly and died too soon. Many in the crowd felt unease crawling beneath their praise. They saw what was plain before their eyes, yet they were surrounded by voices insisting on the opposite. So they clung to the safety of repetition. Better to say what everyone else was saying than risk being called a fool. And thus the king moved onward through a city not merely deceived, but trapped by its own cowardice. Then, from among the people, there came a voice too young to understand the rules of fear. A child, lifted above the crowd, looked straight at the king and said in simple astonishment, "But he has nothing on." For a moment, the street seemed to stop breathing. The words were small, almost light, yet they cut through the fog of pretended admiration more sharply than any accusation from court or council could have done. Truth, when spoken plainly, does not need ornament. It only needs a voice willing to utter it. At first, there was only whispering. Then the whisper passed from one person to the next, like wind moving through dry leaves. "He has nothing on," they repeated. Nothing on at all. The king heard it. He knew at once that the child was right, and that all the city now knew it too. Shame burned through him, cold and fierce. Yet because pride is often strongest at the moment it has been most deeply wounded, he lifted his head and continued the procession. Behind him, the attendants still bent low, pretending to carry the invisible train. And so the procession ended, not in triumph, but in exposure. The swindlers were gone, carrying with them the silk, the gold, and the reward of a kingdom too afraid to speak plainly. The court remained, the city remained, and the king remained as well, though not unchanged. For once falsehood has been spoken by everyone, truth sounds both humiliating and merciful when it finally arrives. That is why Andersen's tale lingers in the dark corners of the heart. It is not only about a foolish ruler, it is about the silence that vanity creates and the strange courage it takes to say what all eyes can see.